Hello, everyone. Good afternoon in the UK. Wherever you are, good morning if that's the case for you. Thank you very much for joining us today. This is the 15th webinar in our Data-centric AI series. And today in this edition, we'll be looking at the enterprise. How can data be made AI ready in order to empower global businesses? We'll present our initiative on the topic, the interchange for data and enterprise AI, as well as our recently published framework for AI-ready enterprise data. This will be followed by a panel discussion focusing on what AI readiness means for enterprises. Just a quick intro from me. I'm Stuart Coleman, Director of Learning and Consultancy at the ODI. Over the course of a number of years I've been here, my work's always been involved making data ecosystems that work for people, organizations, and institutions. I'll be the panel chair for today, and I'll be introducing the panelists in a little moment. But first, some housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded. Thank you for moving that along, and shared via social media. So please do push it out there to your networks. It'll also come out through our email newsletter, and it will be archived on the ODI website and YouTube, so you can point people to it thereafter. We may use quotes and extracts from the recording of this in future ODI communications. We strongly encourage you to submit your own questions to the panel discussion. We very much want you to do that and to make this interactive. If you'd like to do so, please use the Q&A functionality on this Zoom webinar. Your questions will be curated by our team and put to the panelists later. We'll do our best to get as many of those out as we can. And our team will also be in the chat over the course of this webinar. If you need anything or want to ask anything, just ping us, please do. So as I said, this is the 15th webinar of our Data-centric AI series. A program, can we just move to the third slide? Thank you. So you can see our program where we share our own work at the ODI has evolved, and we invite experts from around the world regularly to tell us and share their key insights and recommendations for building the socio-technical data infrastructure needed to make AI work better for all of us. You can find these recordings on all the webinars here with experts from technology companies, academia, governments, public sector, all available on the YouTube channel as well. Today's recording will be made available in a couple of weeks once the closed captions have been added. So thank you very much for that. I'd like to now delighted to introduce our speakers, and I'm delighted to be joined by three real experts in the world of data. Firstly, Professor Paul Groth. Paul is a professor of algorithmic data science at the University of Amsterdam, where Paul leads the Intelligent Data Engineering Lab. He's also a scientific director of the Data Science Centre there. He holds a PhD in computer science from the University of Southampton, actually founding partners to the ODI years ago, back into 2007, and has done research at the University of Southern California with the VU Amsterdam and Elsevier Labs. His research focuses on intelligent systems for dealing with large amounts of diverse contextualized data, with a particular focus on web and science applications. This includes research in data provenance, data integration, and knowledge sharing. It's really great to have you join us, Paul. Thanks for making time today.
Hi.
Next, delighted to have Katrine Cheng, and thank you for joining us, I believe, from British Columbia today. So an early start for you over in Canada. Katrine is Vice President in Product Marketing at SAP, a business and technology leader with more than 20 years of experience, particularly focused on data and analytics. Katrine's current role involves working on strategic partnerships, field go-to-market, accelerators, and successful adoption of SAP's data and analytics propositions. Katrine's worked closely with partners, customers, and global stakeholders over many years to ensure successful adoption of technologies. And I think that'll be really useful, valuable experience here. Thanks for joining us early, Katrine.
Great. Thanks so much, Stuart. Happy to be here.
And finally, my esteemed colleague, I'm delighted we've got Professor Eleanor Simpel, one of the leading UK and European advocates for AI that is transparent, trustworthy, and truly human-centric. I mean, I've had the privilege of working with Eleanor over a number of years, and now as the ODI's Director of Research and co-director of King's College London's Institute for Artificial Intelligence. Eleanor is globally recognized as the A-minor top 2,000 most influential scholars for AI in the world, and is the UK's expert on building AI that works for people rather than just on them. Did I miss anything, Eleanor, or is that a good intro?
No,
No, that's great. Thank you so much. And you'll hear a bit more from me and about the work that we've been doing in the short while.
Great. Thank you. So during the panel, just to reiterate, there is an opportunity for you, the audience, to ask questions as you wish. Please feel free to add them in the Q&A section over the course of Eleanor's presentation as you may think of them as they come up, and we can put them to the speakers in due course. I'm going to move on now and pass it over to you, Eleanor, to get into the meat of what people are here to hear about today.
Thank you. That's great. I am absolutely delighted to tell you about a new program that we are launching today, where we are embarking on an exciting journey, looking at enterprise data ecosystems and how they are designed and shaped in the age of generative AI. So let's move to the next slide, Neil. Thank you very much. I think I don't need to explain this to such an esteemed, informed audience in our Data-centric AI webinar series. But what drove this initiative is a reinforced realization that as businesses are adopting AI to realize many benefits for their internal operations, their customers and supply chains, data, their enterprise data becomes more crucial than ever, because it's those data foundations that are essential for realizing the AI benefits that they want to have. So against this background, we have launched or are launching IDEA, which, as Stuart has explained, stands for an interchange for data and enterprise AI. This is an initiative which is setting up a program of interdisciplinary work, of research, community building, peer learning, to help enterprises of all sizes across the ecosystem make the most of those AI benefits that I mentioned earlier. And through our work over the last 14 years at the ODI, we know that that can only be done in a responsible and sustainable way if the enterprise data foundations are AI ready, if they are built using interoperable standards, as well as well-designed governance frameworks. We're moving to the next slide. Why is this interesting? Well, enterprise data offers a unique context for AI readiness and for designing and thinking of data infrastructure and ecosystems, not just because of the various modalities and domains that it has, but also because in many enterprises, it is still trapped in expensive, siloed platforms and infrastructure that are spread across different teams, sometimes in different jurisdictions. With AI, specifically with the flexibility that the Gen AI is offering, there is a big opportunity to finally bridge those silos and gaps and connect those dots. If we're moving to the next slide, if we could move to the next slide. Say, in this unique context, the question that we asked with our first piece of inaugural research that was sponsored by SAP was, how do you enable a successful and responsible AI adoption? And our answer has been, of course, by making data across the organization and across different enterprise platforms AI ready. What does this actually mean? The ODI has been working on AI readiness for more than a year. And we know from our projects, from what our clients and collaborators are telling us, that AI readiness is determined by a number of things. It's not just about technical optimization, though this is really, really important, having those technical skills and capabilities to take data and put it in technical formats that reduce frictions and let AI models make the most of the data is important. But it is also about data quality. Data quality understood in the classical traditional information management sense, but also with a view towards those specific requirements introduced by machine learning and agentic AI. Adherence to standards becomes even more important as some of the data flows and data governance are automated, legal compliance, as well as doing this responsibly, not just within organizations but also across. So if you're moving on to the next slide, for us that those dimensions translate in specific requirements, not just for the data itself, but also for the machine readable metadata and documentation that surrounds it, the infrastructure where the data is published and stewarded, as well as the governance frameworks around it. So what have we done in this piece of research? We wanted to build a holistic framework for AI enterprise, AI-ready enterprise data. And to do that, we first looked at what is out there. So we've studied more than 20 existing frameworks. We've spoken to experts. We've also audited a number of relevant projects in more of a decade of project experience at the ODI, and then set out to design this framework, identify different dimensions, which we then clustered and organized in a way that hopefully provides useful, actionable recommendations for data stewards and data publishers within enterprises to start a conversation about AI readiness, make a plan about and put it in practice. We're moving to the next slide. The work was building on, I said that AI readiness is an area at the ODI that has been going on for more than a year. Earlier this year, we have launched our ODI AI readiness framework, which was organized across these 4 dimensions that I have mentioned earlier: data set, metadata, infrastructure, and governance. So we have built on that work. And we wanted to understand with the new research how the standard practice from areas that we had already looked at need to be potentially tailored for the unique needs of enterprise organizations and their infrastructure, and of course the way in which they are using AI, both internally as well as to create new products and services. And that led to new dimensions, as well as considerations around cutting-edge data solutions that support enterprise AI readiness journeys. That includes areas like master data management, semantic interlinking across different enterprise systems, as well as with agentic AI, an increased requirement and need to build monitoring and observability infrastructure. I don't have lots of time to go through it. This is a preview of how the framework looks like with those 4 areas I have mentioned earlier. There's for each of them a number of recommendations and descriptions. I know we will have the opportunity to touch on some of these recommendations also in the panel. So I think I will leave it at that. The team is going to share the research we have published today in the chat. And I'm very much looking forward to your feedback and to the conversation with my colleagues about how we could take something like this recommendation and maturity assessment instruments that we have built and support organizations of all sizes to make the most of their data for AI purposes. Thank you.
Thanks, Eleanor. That was great and really concise and fantastic to see the work to come to life. Delighted now to kind of kick things off. And it's really energizing to see people popping up on my other screen in the community who are interested from all over the world, from the Netherlands, from the UK, from Canada. So great to have people engaging with us from all over the place. So let's get stuck into some dialogue with our panelists. I want to start a bit broader and go towards a topic Eleanor mentioned earlier about the context of enterprises specifically when it comes to their data and AI. So Katrine, I mean, you're obviously a representative of SAP, the European's largest tech company, although I better say not if you count ASML because they're on the this community too. I think they are the largest actually at the moment in the Netherlands by market cap. But let's just ask you, as someone that works with enterprises all over the world with hugely business critical software, what are the key nuances that set enterprise data apart from anything else? What is the landscape like about enterprise data, and how has it changed over time? We've obviously been through various inflection points before in technology. This is a new one. So can you give us your perspectives?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question, Stuart. And I'll build on what Alina said earlier as well, right? So she already shared a bit about this. So enterprise data is unique because it represents how a business actually operates. Like think of the data coming from finance and supply chain to HR, sales, and customer experience. And obviously, all these business functions also flow into each other. And therefore, unlike public data, this data is really connected. It's highly connected and deeply rooted in business context. So, for example, if you see a report, a sales number or a revenue number is only valuable when you understand, which customers it came from, which region it came from, the products, the suppliers, the employees that contributed to it. So by itself, it actually doesn't tell you much, but when the context is added, then you know a lot about what's going on in your company. Um, enterprise landscapes have changed tremendously. So you mentioned, I've been working with data and analytics for a really long time. 15 years ago, organizations started moving applications to the cloud. And back then, the funny thought was that it would simplify things, but no. Right now, everything's massively complex. Organizations are running hybrid, multi-cloud environments. They've got data scattered across dozens of business applications, platforms, silos, which is also why data fragmentation in silos has become a challenge for operationalizing AI.
Mm.
AI needs that complete picture to be accurate. You can't build an agentic system when you only have silos and small views of your business. And that's why connecting and preserving business context is so important.
Yeah, I mean
So
that's really helpful. Thank you. And I like the characterization of people thought cloud was going to make the world simpler, but actually now we've got scattered data still in many different locations, which kind of brings me nicely on to ask Paul a question. I mean, we're obviously focused on the data, the role of data in AI here. When you consider what data does and what it enables, the role it plays in AI, where do you see data being used and for what kind of AI implementations, and like specifically enterprise data here, that perhaps aren't being talked about as much? Obviously, there's so much hype around generative AI. So can you just kind of go into that a bit for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think enterprise data is really special. It's really hot here in Amsterdam, right? And
And the UK.
yeah, and I was thinking today, one of my cousins is actually uh, air conditioning tech
Yeah.
in Phoenix, Arizona. And so
Okay.
this
Wow.
spring, I was talking to him, and he was saying, "Hey, how do you use AI in your, fixing air conditioners?" And actually, he said, "We use it all the time. We use a product from a company called Bluon, and he has a bunch of airco techs that are out throughout Arizona and Phoenix, where they have a specially trained chatbot trained on service call data. So this company kind of made the pivot from a place where you would call them on the phone, where they'd have service calls. They take that specialized enterprise data, and now they've trained an AI platform where now you can converse with that background data, and that enterprise data has made that facility for them possible, right? So this for me is just a great example of the special nature of enterprise data. So that's one example that I really like given the context we're currently in.
Yeah, no, that's a great example in terms of bringing it home to bear on us people today who are in hot parts of the European kind of dome of heat, as I think they're calling it, which is certainly the case here. I don't know what it's like over in Canada, Catherine. Just quickly back to you for a second. Like, what sort of uptake in AI everywhere? Like, what about the data? Is everyone treating their data underpins AI with the importance it deserves? I mean, what are you seeing with customers?
yeah, we're definitely seeing a shift, right? Up to now, I mean, the AI era started only 3 years ago, if you can believe it. And At that time, everyone was focused on really the AI tools, but now I think things are shifting. We see a ton of adoption, and I love Paul's story as well, actually, because it shows a different part of the enterprise data that I hadn't been exposed to. Because we see a lot of companies, organizations adopting AI across the board at very different stages of maturity. Some of them are just getting started with predictive forecasts, for example, right? And now we also see organizations looking at AI agents and even multi-agent solutions that can automate complex business processes. So you can see that adoption is it's a broad range right now.
Yeah.
What many of these organizations have in common, though, is, like I said, they focus on the tools, but now they're realizing that the AI-ready data foundation is super key, especially when they're now getting ready to go from experimentation over to actually deploying it in production and scaling it out, right? I've been to a number of conferences this year, and that's been a key topic: context, data foundation for AI, and ability to scale and move from, like I said, the experimentation to deployment.
Well, that helps us go back in, I guess, from thank you for framing that. Just to let's get down under the hood of these four characteristics that we've outlined. I mean, we've talked about them as dimensions, the data set properties, the metadata, the infrastructure, and the governance. And I'd like to go a little bit deeper on each. So let's just go into data sets. I mean, we've talked about, I guess, building management systems and HVAC data there a second ago. But what's the difference between a data set that is unoptimized and one that is optimized? Eleanor, can you just kind of wrap that up for us and explain that in clear?
It's an interesting question, right? And we've touched upon this briefly in the conversation so far. So there's many different types of data and in what you call technically different modalities. So you will have time series data, weather observations, or sensor data from your air conditioning devices and your buildings. You will have a lot of text and imagery and audio and speech. Paul can talk about speech data a lot. So for each of these, you will need to think very carefully about how you would be using this data for AI purposes. Now, when it comes to how to make the data AI ready, there's some things that have been discussed a lot for ages, from the time when we were talking about big data, when we were talking about data science, when we were talking about intelligent technologies, and so on and so forth. So the quality of the data and the work that you need to do on the data itself, removing duplicates, fixing inconsistencies, handling missing values, normalizing formats, that's still important. And of course, someone could argue, yes, but now with AI, and if you have enough data, none of this is going to matter, because look at these large language models. What they have done, they have taken all the data as it was on the public web, and they still have amazing results. But guess what? In enterprises, you don't have those sort of scenarios. If you think about embodied AI, about robotics, you don't have the huge amounts of data, varied data, human produced and curated data, to be able to rely on those redundancies and still produce something useful. So even if you do, there are studies and increasing evidence base that actually investing in the quality of the data and its governance will pay off further down the line. Same concerns around privacy and compliance, something that enterprises have been grappling with and implemented solutions for many years. Still absolutely important. Regulation is changing. In various jurisdictions, there's in the UK, there's the ICO and various regulators who are already providing guidance on what it means actually for existing regulations to be applicable and for enterprises to be compliant with existing regulations around data in AI use cases. But then for machine learning specifically, so since we're talking about prediction, about generation of new content, doing analysis of biases and how representative the data is for the problem that you are trying to solve can spare you a lot of trouble further down the line. And then lots of the data is augmented. So you will add some sort of labels, annotations to it. So being very deliberate about how those labels are defined, being very cautious about the quality of those labels, capturing the provenance is super important. And then there's new formats in which you can offer that data. And for instance, in embeddings or vector databases, which are really genuine technical formats that are useful for AI use cases. So yes, offer your data as a bunch of CSV files with all the things that I have mentioned. But in addition to this, also think about the AI native or machine learning native formats that would allow someone to use that data more easily without making those investments themselves.
Thanks, Helena. That's great. So I think what you've done there is you've unpacked what I think is a key output of this work, which is a clear definition around what AI-ready data means, like going from the kind of technically optimized through to the standards, compliant, mindful of legal and regulatory needs, which of course most enterprises operate across multiple jurisdictions, whether that's where their data lives or travels. And then, of course, going back to what actually responsible collection and curation and sharing of data actually means, which again is in certain industries and sectors very, very complex. And I think one of the things I've noticed actually from talking about this topic over the last few weeks is a excitement in data communities about metadata, which can, if you're not in data, be quite boring to people. But actually, I think a lot of people who have been in data a long time are excited that suddenly other people are starting to understand the importance of metadata. So I'm going to ask you about this, Paul. It feels to me like metadata now is getting a bit more oomph, a bit more meaning. And, obviously you talked about context a minute ago. You mentioned it yourself. Like, just put it in context for me, if you can. Like, we're talking about all these autonomous agents. I think Cloudflare published data about 4 or 5 weeks ago showing there's more traffic online now that's not human. Like, it went over the 50% mark. So there's agents and systems out there. Like, tell me about metadata. How's it taking on a different meaning?
Yeah, I think what we've always realized in data systems and people who are using data in long data pipelines and things like that is the importance of the context. What do you mean by this column? What do you mean by this entity? But now we're having more and increasing amount of data available to AI agents to do things. And just like people need high quality metadata to really understand a table or a graph or a set of documents, so do AI agents. And what we're seeing is across our data systems, across our data lakes, there's just a real gap in that kind of context information. And so before, maybe if you were a data engineer or maybe you were a data product owner, you could call up the source member. You could say, hey, can you give me the context of that? You could dig around in a wiki, email some people, and figure out the context of the data because these AI agents can take advantage of really the plethora of the data out there. You're really seeing that gap in the available metadata and context. And that's why, it's really nice to see people saying, oh, man, we really need to invest in having really high quality context and even better context than maybe we did prior in previous generations of metadata description. I don't know, does that resonate with you, Katrin, in your experience as well?
Yeah, I love hearing that actually. I was going to say, so I've attended many data and AI conferences this year, too many to count. And one thing you'll see is everyone now has context on their signboards, right? So now they realize, and like I said, last year the conferences talked more about, hey, we've got the best models, we've got the best tools, but now it's all about context. So you're spot on there,
Yeah.
Paul. It is
Yeah.
a big trend now. And it is nice. I agree with you. It's nice that people now realize the importance of that metadata and that data foundation.
Yeah, thanks both. I mean, I think ultimately it's shone a light on the criticality of metadata. That's kind of the great step forward. I mean, looking at the third dimension of the framework, we talked about surrounding infrastructure on data sets. And obviously, traditionally, people have always been working on challenges around accessibility and findability, version control. But Eleanor surfaced a few of the newer features that we think are particularly critical with agents, things like observability and monitoring. So, Katrine, are you seeing examples of best practices in this kind of in the sorts of infrastructure that you're talking about with clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So best practices. I mean, I think it really needs to start with recognizing the need for an AI-ready data infrastructure in the first place, right? One that can deliver that high quality, that semantically rich with the metadata and context-aware data at scale. One best practice is really to build a connected architecture. So, to everyone's point, I think everyone mentioned fragmentation at one point here in this conversation, and that cloud environments, hybrid, it is really hard to get that one view of the business context end to end. So really that connected architecture will help, whether it's a data fabric or something similar, something that reduces the data movement, the silos, and really just, again, makes that data connected across the enterprise. And that will really give AI that one consistent view across your business so that agents can actually make the right decisions. You would never want to build an agent that can only see one part of the business. You have no idea what kind of decisions they'll make for it, for your company, whether it brings it forward or brings it back.
Yeah, I mean, I guess autonomy of agents is something that a lot of people are very anxious about for good reason, and that brings me nicely on to the fourth critical dimension, which is governance. We at the ODI have been talking about data governance and data stewardship for quite a long time. We've been doing that in a kind of variety of contexts and environments. Here with agents emerging in the enterprise environment, it feels like a slightly different moment. I mean, Eleanor, what do you think about data governance? How should it look like in commercial organizations? What does it need to do? How does it need to look like in this age of AI? Because it feels like the stakes are higher. It feels like it's a riskier chapter that we're moving into. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, but it's also an opportunity, right? So, like we were saying before, um, some of the challenges that we have been discussing in the last half an hour have been around for many, many years. With the opportunities that AI creates, with the revolution that these technologies could bring about in various sectors and enterprises, this focuses the minds because people are investing in AI capabilities. Companies are under a lot of pressure to look at the opportunity and experiment with opportunities that AI brings. There is a lot of buy-in from senior leadership and from shareholders in doing this. Getting the data right can be beneficial for various reasons, including costs. But that's
Yeah.
not the question you have asked. You have asked about data governance. Now, there's a lot to unpack there, but just to mention a few things. So I've talked about data quality and how important it is to take it seriously, to make sure that your AI models perform well. And by that, I don't just mean the fat, expensive to run models that have access to lots of data. I mean the lean, sustainable models that you could potentially build or fine tune in house. Data quality from a governance point of view in AI needs to go beyond things like accuracy or consistency of values. So you need to look at how representative the data is for your machine learning task. You need to do an analysis of quality issues, of compound quality issues across different types of mixed model architectures and agentic workflows. Now, if we're moving to metadata, let's just think about a data catalog in an enterprise. It needs to capture a lot of information, standard information about data sets. It also needs to talk ideally about AI related properties, like is this data set intended to be used for training versus inference? Where do the annotations come from? What type of quality assurance did we do on those annotations? What data set versions, the link between the data set versions and the model versions, schemas. knowledge graphs, ontologies that are used to provide context to that data. Now, there's a lot of talk about security and access control. All that becomes even more important because training data access patterns are very different from the type of sort of retrieval scenarios that we are used to, that we were building data catalogs for. So we're talking bulk extraction at scale. We're talking doing this by automated pipelines that need to be constantly monitored and observed. And you need to account for all this in your governance framework. And then there's, of course, compliance and risk. So there's questions around consent, of use of data for training, for fine-tuning for different purposes. And that's a distinct legal question that is currently still being answered in different jurisdictions. There's questions around copyright, database rights, and what that means in AI. Now, the one thing that I find particularly interesting is that traditionally we at the ODI and elsewhere have been thinking about governance scenarios in which the data is governed as it is, right? So you have a data set sort of at rest, right? And you govern that data set, or you have a data set in transit and you do that as well. And we have some solutions to do that. Now, with AI, the data is in the model, in the weights. And then you have these agents that act based on what's in those models in the world or within the enterprise. See, what that means in terms of governing those data representations is something that I don't think we have yet an answer for, but it's perhaps a topic that we do more research in.
Yeah, I mean, I can see your hunger to get stuck into some of these areas. I think the exciting thing is, obviously, we hear a lot of negative things about, oh, well, there's the risk of jobs disappearing with AI, but actually what you've just described is a rapidly emerging ecosystem where there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of new roles here. And I was talking about this kind of topic of new emerging professions in the data community at the intersection of data and AI, rapidly emerging, and the fact that these new tools and techniques can make some of that work possible as well. Anyway, I get excited about that, but I must stick to a few of the final closing questions we have before we can get stuck into some of the audience engagement, which I'm seeing coming in. Thank you, Neil, for curating that. It's looking great. So I've got a quick fire, a few questions for the panel. One of them is how do we actually practically get enterprise data AI ready? There's no like single silver bullet off the shelf product or service, particularly for large multi-jurisdictional organizations. So what can you do? Katrin, here's your chance for a plug. What solutions might be out there and how can they be combined?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, organizations can't really become AI ready with just one solution, I'll admit it, right? It really does take a combination of technologies, processes, and disciplines to get a solid foundation. Now, of course, at SAP, we really champion the data fabric strategy. We also see many more organizations kind of choosing open architectures, right, with really broad ecosystems, because again, it's all about creating that connected enterprise. No longer working with data in silos and ETL pipelines that strip that important business context we've been talking about this whole time.
Yeah.
And then Alina touched on data quality. You got metadata management, master data management to dedupe everything. And then the other key thing I've seen folks talk about too is you really need unified governance across data and AI. Today, governance is done so differently for data, and now you really have to think about the agent part of it. Because to Paul's point, people can think, they can find the context themselves, but with AI, they only know what they're given. And so if we don't have governance or clear governance, accountability and ownership from data all the way down to AI, then that's a big, gap in the visibility and some governance issues can totally come out of that. So, I mean, you need all these solutions. Now, the question is, can you get this all from one vendor? Maybe. But I think the important thing is really have that architecture and plug all those capabilities and solutions into that unified strategy instead of having kind of like that one silver bullet for everything. So that's kind of my opinion on that.
No, that's helpful. So you need a kind of portfolio approach to tackle all the different issues. And I think the point you're saying there that chimes with what Eleanor said is that the way data exists in the world of AI has changed. It's not like to Eleanor's earlier point, the way we used to see it at the ODI. It's like it's rapidly changed. Paul, what about you? Just before I come back to Eleanor for the final say, have you seen anything particularly that's kind of blown your socks off that you think, wow, that's an amazing solution that is just really helping get data AI ready out there?
I mean, I want to just comment on one thing that was said, and I think it's really an important thing coming out of this conversation is that one of the really nice features or interesting features of AI is that more kinds of information artifacts become data, right? So
Yeah,
documents that we used to treat as something we organize with document management systems, images, video, and now
yeah.
because more information types are data, we have to extend that governance framework maybe a little bit farther than we thought about before.
Mhm.
The things I'm excited about are the emergence of really new kind of open metadata standards that are made for AI. So one great example is the work on croissants for describing data sets for machine learning. Another one that's kind of very interesting is in the area of provenance. So describing where and how your data is produced. Here, I would point to the authenticity initiative and their work there. So I think there's an emergence of rapidly adopting metadata descriptions that are designed natively for AI systems. And so that's something I'm excited about. And also you see a lot more wide amounts of vendor support for that kind of thing. So that's also good.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I mean, I think that's actually a really nice way to have addressed the question because you've effectively talked about communities of practice and initiatives that are emerging where people are tackling these problems together. And we'll definitely make sure we put some of the links to things like ML Commons Croissant, which Ellen is obviously closely involved in as well as initiatives tackling some of these challenges and opportunities. So before we go to audience questions, and we've got some coming in, Eleanor, what do you think? Have you seen anything kind of that's particularly innovative out there to tackle any of these problems and challenges?
I think I am a big believer in products that solve specific challenges for specific data modalities. Say, I think when I speak to industries in different sectors, when I speak to scientists from different disciplines who are now also using AI for scientific discovery, it becomes apparent that while in the past we thought a lot about what our sector is doing, what our scientific community is doing, now we're seeing lots of patterns and common use cases in different data modalities. So depending if you're working with lots of imagery, or if you're working with time series, or if you're in robotics, so that ability to be able to work with a certain type of data species is really really becoming important, and that means that creates new opportunities for companies that are in this space. Now, I'm going to go back to one area which we have touched on, which is that provenance lineage, the need to monitor and observe and reproduce. This is something that enterprises have been talking about for decades. Say we're talking about workflow management, business process management. We are now in a situation, as Paul alluded to, we're in a situation now where we have the technology to make this work. And standards like the Prov ontology, which Paul and others worked on in the past, are finally surrounded by the infrastructure and the tools to see them applied at scale. So the new types of products that I'm most excited about are in that space, right? So tools that allow you to do enterprise lineage properly, to track where the data came from. And not just that, but to be able to link versions of data set that have been used to train or fine tune certain types of models so that you can do auditing, so you could do versioning and rollbacks. The other thing that I, perhaps a bit geeky, am quite interested in is this whole area of legacy systems and older data. We know that a lot of data in enterprises and in any other type of organization has no lineage. There is no schema documentation. The business rules and context are implicit, are tacit, are documented in processes that have been around for decades, perhaps. But we're now in the possession of technologies that allow us to reconstruct that lineage infrastructure. And we have to do that if we want to use that data to train AI safely. So that's a second category of product that I think is really important and exciting for me personally. And I think the final thing I would say is that this specialized product, if they are designed with interoperability in mind, can really lead to that modular solution, AI readiness solution for any type of enterprise operating in any sector with whatever type of data.
Yeah, thanks, Eleanor. I think that's a nice way to have summed up the fact that we are at this moment where the advances in some of these tools, capabilities, and technologies is helping improve the data landscape for everyone and tackle some of these long-standing challenges that others have faced and really bring the ecosystem forward. So let's dive in on some of the audience questions. And we've got people, as I said earlier, from all over the world here. We've actually got a fantastic question coming from in fact, I'm probably going to pronounce this incorrectly. So if another panelist wants to step forward and tell me, Curacao, which I think is in the Caribbean. And they're saying, well, for small organizations and islands in the Caribbean, a lot of the best practice frameworks are just overkill. We're operating in an environment that either doesn't have the manpower or the skill, the knowledge, or the budget to implement such a framework. However, they do have the maturity to start fully fledged projects. So they're looking for an adaptive approach to AI readiness, especially governance. Katrina, sorry to put you on the spot, but do you have any recommendations about the individual steps that should be taken for smaller organizations in less data mature environments to get AI ready? Or anyone else on the panel can help with that question?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a broad topic. Where do you start is the common question. I talked about the best practice of just identifying that you do need an architecture that can adopt, right? So my answer to these types of things is always start small, start focused, so you have that infrastructure and you can build upon it. The great thing is that if you could go with governance from the beginning, that would definitely help. See, governance is an enabler, not something that'll slow you down, because once you actually have that full visibility and governance across, then your AI can actually proceed a lot faster, right? That's kind of my thoughts. So Alina and Paul would love to hear your opinions.
I think I should also add that so what I have presented earlier, and that long list of different things that should ideally be there, does not mean that you need to do everything on that list to the fullest extent to be AI ready. It is a spectrum. And also I think with the framework that we have proposed and are launching today, we wanted to be deliberate about the way it was designed. We wanted it to be as practical as possible. We have reviewed existing frameworks exactly because of the feedback that you have given us about the fact that they are complex, they are abstract. It's quite difficult to translate some of those considerations in practice. And to some degree, this reminds me of a piece of work Paul and I have done a long time ago, which was in the area of FAIR data. So FAIR is a framework that stands for, it's an acronym that stands for findable, actionable, interoperable, and reusable. There's literally hundreds of approaches that say this is what you need to do to get your data fairer than your business competitor. And we sat down and I think FAIR, Paul, you were on the FAIR paper, on the original, and we sat down, we looked at that and said, of course no one is doing this properly. And then what we did next is we were able to look at data publishing practices and their digital traces, and be able to prioritize some of those attributes based on actual data use and impact. I don't think we're there yet with AI or machine learning data sets, but with the framework we're launching today, we absolutely recognize that, and each of those aspects really can be taken individually, and none of them is, say, more important than others.
Thanks, Eleanor. I think so. Just on those 2 points, like definitely governance is somewhere that maybe you could, to Katrine's point, get going pretty quickly with if you're maybe a smaller jurisdiction. But I do think it would be interesting for us to kind of expand on. We should put a link, by the way, to the FAIR data work from Wikipedia in the chat if we can do that to our team. That would, I'm sure, be useful for people. But let's just expand on governance a bit, because we've got another question specifically about governance. And one audience member is saying, well, hang on, what about different kinds of governance? We've obviously talked about data governance in AI, but then what about agent governance? Because if we've got agents and we're treating those like they're effectively robotic employees for all intensive purposes, how do we enforce rules about the data that they're using, or rules for the agents and the frameworks they're going to follow? And how do we ensure they don't step outside of these rules? And funnily enough, this morning I was talking about this topic where someone in a kind of Chatham House environment was saying, well, I've kind of got this sprawling agentic world of people across my organization building these things. And how do I get them into some sort of registry where I can monitor what's going on? Because it's just kind of chaos. This was someone very anxious from a large organization at a private roundtable this morning, whose organization I won't mention. But I mean, Paul, maybe you could kind of come in here and give us your perspectives. Like, how do you get across governing AI agents?
I think one of the principles I always really strongly believe in governance in general for data, but also in AI governance, is this notion of identity. Who can I call up? Who can I point to? And can I get back to that identity? Because then I can start doing things about governance. I can see, I can do transparency, I
Yeah.
can maybe see who to blame. So identity for agents is important. And what I'm very kind of heartened by is that identity providers, you can think of one like Okta, I think Google
Yeah.
and a lot of the identity providers have now quickly introduced agent identity so that just as you have in your enterprise a people like I'm in my SAP system here at the University of Amsterdam, I have identity. We can now have agent identity, and that's kind of this foundation for building the rest of the governance infrastructure up. So I think that's really the place to start in that frame.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's a really nice way to kind of frame it. I hadn't thought of it kind of as that identity challenge, and very timely for people in the UK where we have an identity consultation going on, um, uh, from a sort of governmental point of view. But just uh, so we're kind of coming towards the end of this webinar. We've got a couple more questions before I'd like the panelists to wrap up with some closing remarks. So, if we're talking about agents in the context of their outputs too, not only the scripts that they write, the documents they produce, there's also the kind of traces, the telemetry, and sort of the data that they generate, I would call exhaust data from all the activities, sorry, all the actions they're conducting and carrying out. So how do we enforce rules about that? Just can you like we've got stuff in our framework, I think, which kind of nods towards this. Maybe Eleanor, you could expand on that.
I mean, as we were saying earlier, I think this is becoming easier than it used to be, because we do have these levels of automation, increased levels of automation and autonomy. We can build logging and monitoring functionality.
Yeah.
There are emerging standards that make it easier for smaller organizations as well to set up their own infrastructure or rely on and expand existing products. So I think what we have less experience with is what is happening with that data. You were calling it exhaust data. I call it agentic metadata, because I think it's just as important as the type of metadata related directly to data sets that we were mentioning earlier. So I feel what is still underexplored is best practices around how do you interpret that data? What types of risk levels, thresholds do you want to set for yourself in accordance to your governance framework, of course, for acting and reacting based on what you're seeing is happening in your agentic environment.
Okay.
And lots of it will depend very much on the individual enterprise, and on how those agents are built. I should also say that various agents that organizations are enterprised with are experimenting with are essentially tool chains. Say if you start with those types of agents that are essentially doing workflow automation, if you're starting thinking about how do you actively use and monitor the logs of those workflow systems, and what does that mean for your governance and compliance framework, then I think that's already a starting point, not just to manage risks, but also to have a more grounded conversation. Because people are panicking. Yes, of course they're panicking because they've seen news about open Claude and whatnot. But actually, if you start small and without giving agents too much autonomy, if you're not comfortable with that, but really try to understand how you would take decisions around the behavior of the and performance of those agents, then that will lead you in the right direction.
Thanks for that. So I think I'd like to work towards getting each panelist to give some closing remarks. Tell us kind of, we've obviously focused on these 4 dimensions of what AI ready data means. We've outlined that, we believe, based on our research and analysis of these frameworks, that the kind of right balance for AI ready data is data that's technically optimized for machine learning, data that is adherent to appropriate standards where it's going to be used, accessed, or kind of shared, data that is legally and regulatory compliant and is responsibly collected. So we've kind of been through these. We've touched on different areas of that. We've gone into the governance piece in quite a bit of detail. We've looked at how AI can be used to help do some of these tasks and works. I'm sure we could expand on that if we had a bit more time. But I'd like to wrap up with some closing comments, perhaps from you first, Katrine. What's next? What's coming? What do you see next in data in the enterprise?
It's actually pretty exciting, I think. We're entering like the next phase of enterprise AI, right? Like, again, I like Paul's example of the HVAC. I mean, they're using enterprise data. Anyone can use enterprise data properly. I think AI adoption will continue to mature. AI will become more embedded into business processes more seamlessly, ubiquitously, and naturally. And the demand for AI-ready data will just continue to grow. And last comment would be, ultimately, I think the companies, the organizations that start investing in their AI-ready data foundation now will be the ones to first realize that value from their investments and see better business outcomes. Because that's kind of like where we're going now, right? We're going from experimentation now to operationalizing the AI.
Yeah,
so those are my comments.
Thanks, Katrina. Appreciate that. And I think that's definitely chiming with what we've heard throughout the discussion today. And Paul, what about from your point of view? What do you see as the exciting developments coming down the track?
I think the data foundations being a critical part of integrating AI into your enterprise is just becoming, as we're seeing here, to the point and what people need to do. And what's nice, I think, is that as we create data foundations for AI systems, we create better data foundations for us as people who want to use data in an enterprise. So I'm kind of excited about that kind of interaction between making data better for both humans and machines.
Yeah, that's great. I like the way you characterize that, exactly that piece we talked about this morning at this round table about how does the data work for both people and AIs, right? And that's great that you characterize it in that way. So, Eleanor, last word from you. What's exciting? What's coming down?
I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction, but I'm glad Paul mentioned people, because as organizations are experimenting with AI, more enterprise staff are using AI in various ways. So we will have, and organizations will have access to a lot of data about AI usage. They will be able to link this data to the performance of the models, to the costs associated with their models, to productivity, perhaps for staff and different business processes. I would love to be able to have a way to trace that back, to link that back to data qualities, so that we have more control and more means, more methods to link data quality, investment in metadata and surrounding infrastructure, building stronger data foundation to optimized human performance and technical AI performance.
So, thank you for that closing enthusiasm. I think, well, there's consensus from everyone that there's an exciting moment to be in the world of data for enterprise AI. And I would be delighted if those who have joined today look to kind of join our community. You can do that at the ODI's website. The interchange for data and enterprise AI is just getting started. It was a really rich discussion, and I hope you, in particular, the audience, found it as engaging as we did. As mentioned before, this content will be made available. Please keep an eye out for what's coming next, and I wish everyone a great rest of their day wherever they are. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.